Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text number 7. Translation. This Gajendra had formerly been a Vaishnava and the king of the country known as Pandya, which is in the province of Dravida, South India. In his previous life, he was known as Indradyumna Maharaj. Number 8. Indradyumna Maharaj retired from family life and went to the Malaya hills, where he had a small cottage for his ashram. He wore matted locks on his head and always engaged in austerities. Once, while observing a vow of silence, he was fully engaged in the worship of the Lord and absorbed in the ecstasy of love of Godhead. Number 9. While Indradyumna Maharaj was engaged in ecstatic meditation, worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the great sage Agastya Muni arrived there, surrounded by his disciples. When the Muni saw that Maharaj Indradyumna, who was sitting in a secluded place, remained silent and did not follow the etiquette of offering him a reception, he was very angry. Text 10. Tasma imam shapam adad ashadu ayam duratma akrita buddhi adya vipra avamanta vishatam tamisram yata gajaha stabdamati sa eva tasmadimam shapam adad asadur ayam duratmakrita buddhir adya Vipravamanta visatam tamisram Yata gajastamba mati sa eva Tasma imam shapnam adad asadur Ayam duratmakrita buddhir adya Vipravanmanta vasalam tamisram Yata gajastam damati sa eva Tasmai unto Maharaj Indradyumna, Imam, this, Shapam, curse, Adad, he gave, Asadu, not at all gentle, Ayam, this, Duratma, degraded soul, Akrita, without education, Buddhi, his intelligence. Adya, now. Vipra, of a Brahmana. Avamanta, insulter. Vishantam, let him enter. Tamisram, darkness. Yata, as. Gajaha, an elephant. Stambhamati, possessing blunt intelligence. Sa, he, eva, indeed. Translation. Agastya Muni then spoke this curse against the king. This king Indradumna is not at all gentle, being low and uneducated. He has insulted a Brahmana. May he therefore enter the region of darkness and receive the dull, dumb body of an elephant. Please repeat. Agastya Muni then spoke this curse against the king. This king Indradumna is not at all gentle, being low and uneducated. He has insulted a Brahmana. May he therefore enter the region of darkness and receive the dull, dumb body of an elephant. Purport. An elephant is a very strong. It has a very big body, and it can work very hard and eat a large quantity of food. But its intelligence is not at all commensurate with the size of its size and strength. Thus, in spite of so much bodily strength, the elephant works as a menial servant for a human being. Agastya Muni thought it wise to curse the king to become an elephant, because the powerful king did not receive Agastya Muni as one is obliged to receive a Brahmin. Yet although Agastya Muni cursed Maharaj Indradumna to become an elephant, the curse was indirectly a benediction, for by undergoing one's life as an elephant, Indradumna Maharaj ended the reaction for all the sins of his previous life. Immediately after the expiration of the elephant's life, he was promoted to Vaikuntha-loka to become a personal associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, in a body exactly like that of the Lord. This is called Swarupya Mukti. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So before I speak, I would like to thank everyone for coming and to offer my obeisances to the authorities of the temple for letting me sit and speak, to all the exalted Vaishnavas, and pray for your blessings, that we might be able to speak and hear something which is authoritative and easily understandable for the glorification of the deities. In this purport here, there's a very there's an important sentence that stands out here that is noticeable, which says that Agastya Muni thought it wise to curse the king to become an elephant, because the powerful king did not receive Agastya Muni as one is obliged to receive a Brahmana. So with this sentence, I would like today to have us think about a couple of main points that are being revealed to us in the previous verse up unto this verse now. And those main points are, first of all, the behavior of Maharaj Indradumna and the behavior of Agastya Muni. So first, let's look at the behavior, because it is very important for us to study these pastimes very, very carefully. and see how they apply to us for our advancement in our spiritual life. So let's look first at the behavior of Maharaj Indradumna. That he was a great king, and he had renounced his kingdom and his family, and he had went to the mountains and constructed a cottage and underwent tapasya. He grew matted hair, jati, and he was observing the vow of silence. And he was so much absorbed in his sadhana that when Agastya Muni came, that he neglected Agastya Muni. So sometimes this is the behavior of the neophyte devotee. That a neophyte devotee is so much absorbed in his particular bhava, a bhajan, that he neglects the proper etiquette and behavior and ignores the standard of operations of a higher devotee. Sometimes we see, not only in our religion, but many religions, you may go into a temple or church or mosque, and you see a person is praying, or you see the person is sitting chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And a guest might walk into the temple or the church or the mosque, and they're confused and they have some dilemma they need to work out. And that practitioner completely ignores the guest because he's so much absorbed in his own self and his own connection with the Lord, that he misses this point that this is the behavior of the neophyte devotee. Because the neophyte devotee only sees the Lord in one particular place. So when the neophyte devotee is engaged in his bhava, he only sees the Lord in his chanting or his deity worship. So he might bump you, come in front of you, walk over you, push you, has to get and have darshan before you, because he's only concerned about his bhava. There's a neophyte. So similarly, Maharaj Indradumna was only concerned about himself, so he was observing the silence, and he neglected the proper etiquette of relating to the Maharaj. But the advanced devotee does not always take his bhava that seriously. I remember when I first met Prabhupada, I walked into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada was deeply absorbed in writing. As soon as Prabhupada saw me, he looked up and he interacted with me just like it was an ordinary event. So he left his ecstasy at that moment to interact with me. Excuse me. So this is the madhyam stage, that the second-class devotee not only sees himself and his relationship with the Lord, but he also sees the devotees of the Lord as well. And if we truly understand the foundational practices of Krishna consciousness, then we can understand that the purpose of all of our foundational practices of a neophyte devotee is to become a madhyam devotee. And to come to this level, we have to study very carefully the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness. A lot of times, individuals who neglect the foundational principles and want to jump up to that which is beyond them miss all of the data and information that they should observe. So quite often, devotees, they want to ignore the lotus feet of the Lord and go and have darshan of the face of the Lord. But the lotus feet of the Lord are the foundation of our initial practice in Krishna consciousness. And the lotus feet of the Lord means the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why Prabhupada, he worked so hard, he gave us that first canto. But he told us that everything that you need for the future is right here, within this very foundation. Because this foundation is like the rock upon which we build our house of devotional service upon. If you don't build your house upon a solid foundation, then when the winds come and the rains fall, the house will move and it shakes and it shifts place to a different place. So similarly, if we don't have a solid foundation in the fundamental principles of Krishna consciousness, and we try to understand that which is beyond us, then we become easily shaken. And we become offensive. So this is the first behavior that I would like for us to contemplate very seriously, not only today, but in the future, to think very seriously about how we are practicing our Krishna consciousness and how that practice affects those who are around us, and specifically those who don't know anything about Krishna. You know, for instance, say somebody comes into the mandir, and they, of course, in India, not even in India, there's no exception to the rule, because people in India also come to the mandir, they don't know anything about Krishna. So let's say a person comes into the mandir, but they're not adversed in the science of Krishna consciousness. And if the devotee is simply so absorbed in his own bhajan that he ignores that person, he misses a great opportunity to please Krishna. Because Krishna himself declares to us that there's no one as dear to me as who? One who preaches to his devotee. So even though we might get a great sensation of ecstasy from our bhava, we can get a greater sensation of ecstasy by preaching to the devotees. So this is a point that if we can consider and meditate upon, we might see that it might open the door for us, might open the window for a higher vision of Krishna consciousness. And we can understand this also if we look at the life of Naraji. In the very first canto, Srila Vyasadeva, he asked Narada Muni, that you've described to me your advancement in self-realization and Krishna consciousness, and it was from a previous life. How is it that you remember from a previous life? So Narad, he says to Vyasadeva, he says, yes, in my previous life, I lived in the ashram of the Brahmins. And of course, twice a year when the rains would come, all the sages would come, and they would sit and take shelter from the rain. And they would discuss Krishna Katha. And I was a gentle, well-behaved boy. And I would simply sit and listen. And because I was well-mannered and well-behaved, they would bless me with the remnants of their prasadam. And then finally they left the ashram. And I was left there all alone with my mother. And my mother was a servant in the ashram. And she was not very, very educated, and she was a very simple woman. And because I was her only child, she loved me so dearly. And her affection bound me up very, very tightly, because she had no other source of dependence. She was highly dependent upon me. So she was very affectionate towards me. But one night she went out to milk the cow, and on her way to milk the cow, she was bit by a serpent, and she passed away. Now Narad had heard the transcendental knowledge from the Munis. So Narad Muni, the first thing he said was, I immediately took this as the mercy of the Lord. Because whatever the Lord does to his devotee is considered to be mercy. And at that time, I immediately headed to the north, and I started walking. And I went through beautiful, big, giant cities and small towns, valleys, villages, through valleys, and I climbed up mountains, and I went into dark caves, crossed through rivers, and I saw vast fields of agricultural production, animal farms. Then I went deep into the dark, dark jungle where there were sharp canes and weeds and tall trees. And it was the playground of snakes, lions, jackals, and owls. And then one day I became very, very tired and thirsty, and I saw a river, and I took some water, and I gained relief from my exhaustion. And then I saw a huge banyan tree, and I sat underneath the tree, and I began to meditate upon Bhagavan Vishnu as I was taught by the sages. So Narad, he began to meditate upon his heart, upon the Paramatma. The Paramatma is situated in each and every living entity's heart. And has a very, very beautiful blackish form. And his feet are very soft and very, very gentle. And his nails are very, very bright and glittering, that even you can look at the nails and you can see your own reflection in his nails. And his feet are well formed. And his ankles are all well formed. And his knees are properly proportioned. And his thighs are very evenly proportioned. And his hips are very, very, very strong. And his belly is very round and very beautiful with a very deep navel. And his chest is very, very broad. And his neck is very, very beautifully decorated, like with the lines of a conch shell. And he has a very wide lips that are shaped just like a lotus, with a well-proportioned nose, and eyes shaped like a lotus, and ears that are well-formed on his head, and a beautiful locks of dark curly hair. And his body is blackish blue, very, very beautiful. And he has 4 arms, and in those arms he holds the lotus, the disc, the conch, and the mace. And he's dressed in a very, very beautiful yellow garment which shines like lightning, and has a very beautiful golden belt studded with gems and jewels, and a beautiful necklace called Kastuba, and the mark of Srivatsa on his chest, and a crown which is decorated, filled with jewels. So Narad, he was meditating like this upon Vishnu. And he became so much absorbed in ecstasy that he forgot himself and the Lord. And at this point of forgetting himself, then he lost the vision of the Lord. And at that time, he became heartbroken and aggrieved. And the Lord, seeing him full of grief, spoke out to him in a very beautiful voice, which sounds like the rumbling of the clouds. And the Lord said, Narad, because you're not complete in your devotion, those who are not complete in their devotion cannot hold on to me. But I've given you a glimpse of me, just so that you'll always remember me. So here we see that even though Narad Muni was deeply absorbed in his bhava, of being totally able to contemplate the vision of the Lord completely, he lost that vision. And when he lost that vision, he became disturbed. Now think about this very carefully. He did not become disturbed about the bhava. He became disturbed because he lost his seva, which was remembering Bhagavan. He became aggrieved from it. So Bhagavan knew that Narad was aggrieved. And then he assured him, don't worry. I've just given you this darshan so that you'll hanker to see me again. Even though you have this great ecstasy, you have this bhava, you'll hanker to see me again. Now at this point, Narad, he also says something which is very, very interesting that we should note. Narad said, at that point, I began to travel all over the world and simply sing and chant the glories of the Lord. How did I sing and chant the glories of the Lord? He says that I began to sing and chant the glories of the Lord in a very, very humble way. Being non-envious and being self-satisfied. Actually, the order that he gives in the Bhagavatam, he says, I chanted being self-satisfied, being humble, and being non-envious. So here Narad teaches us how to chant the holy name of the Lord. First of all, he says that we have to become self-satisfied. Self-satisfied, that means also that we have to come to the stage of being self-realized. Realize ourselves. Because when we realize ourselves, we can realize the Supreme Self. We're all Atma. But Krishna is Paramatma. So the very first meeting, I think I spoke when, yes. That very first meeting when I met Prabhupada, and I can remember right now, just as clear as it was a minute ago, that after we talked for a minute, then Prabhupada, at that time I was in the military, I was in the Navy. I had some dreams and ambition, but Prabhupada asked me, he said, so what is your ultimate goal? And without too much detail now, but I finally said, I said to him, my ultimate goal is to become a doctor. I was thinking about a medical doctor. So Prabhupada asked me, he said, how many doctors graduate every year? And I didn't expect him to ask me that, so I hadn't done any research on it. I didn't have a clue. But I took a guess and I said, well, thousands. And Prabhupada says, yes. But how many graduate in the science of the self? And I said, none. He said, so, first we need doctors of the self. He said, you become a doctor of yourself. Then you become a doctor of anything you want. So this is the mercy of just even a small conversation with a pure devotee. That he looks inside and he activates abilities that you don't even have a clue that you have. That you have no motivation towards. You're running through life and you have some different, distant ideas. And you're hoping that they click and come together. But you don't really know how to make it happen. And you meet people and they give you a little bit here, a little bit there. And you try to put everything together. But a pure devotee sees very clearly inside of each and every one of us. And he directs us individually to come up immediately to our highest potential, which is our relationship with the Lord. So Prabhupada said, first become a doctor of yourself. So Narad Muni, he says that I chant the holy name fully satisfied. And I chant very humbly. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us the instructions how to chant humbly. That when we chant, we should remind ourselves over and over again to always try to keep ourselves low like a blade of grass in the street. And then Narad Muni, he says that I also chant being non-envious. And if we read in Prabhupada's purports, Prabhupada talks a lot about enviousness, that this is the root cause of our disease. In this world that we're here because of our enviousness. So this is a disease that, being a doctor of the self, one of the main diseases that we have to attack immediately. We have to watch this envy in all forms and fashions of other devotees, non-devotees, humans, non-humans, karmis, gyanis, yogis. We have to practice as much as we can and see when we're being envious. And then perform the necessary operation as a doctor of the self to root out this. Now the second point for consideration also is looking at Maharaja Agastya's anger. It's closely connected. Prabhupada says, actually, it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam that one who inquires into self-realization and thus subdues his powerful anger, which awakens suddenly in the body as if falling from the sky, transcends the modes of material nature. Now, a lot of times we think about anger as an afterthought. After it's happened, we regret, oh, why did I do that? I'm sorry, Prabhu, please forgive me. Because it just happens sometimes to us, you know, something happens, we become angry, just like it falls from the sky. Next thing you know, you're victimized by anger, and then we engage in behaviors that we don't really appreciate and others don't appreciate. Yet, before we can really deal with anger, we have to analyze what anger is. So just think a moment about it. All of us have been angry. Little babies, we're lying there in the crib. And when our mothers don't respond, we're kicking, we're angry. And we go through life repeating this behavior when something doesn't please us. But what is this experience that we're undergoing? Think about it. Analyze it. Basically, anger is described by some theorists as a reaction to a frustration, a threat, a slight. You know, somebody just ignores you, you say hi, and they just keep walking, become angry. Or something frustrates us, or somebody threatens us, or some situation, you know, which creates something that is very, very threatening for us, and then we become angry. Now this anger, which is aroused, generally we can detect it in the body. The blood pressure rises. The respiration changes. The BP increases. The blood sugar goes up. And think about it. What is the number one economic force in the world today? That's the petrol business. And what is the number two economic force? Huh?
Military ops.
The number two is pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceutical industry is the number two economic industry in the world. And a couple of times I've gone to the doctor, I get a little cold and allergy, so I go and get some medication. And the first thing the doctors ask me is they say, do you have diabetes? Because a lot of people have diabetes. Why? Because of an increase in the blood sugar. They're on the war footing because of this anger. Blood pressure is up. People, we look around, everybody's full of so much anger. We're not detecting it, but anger is there. Most of the time we direct anger out. But also we direct anger inside at our own soul. We direct anger at our own mind, become angry at our mind. We become angry at our intelligence. How many of us have said, oh, I'm so stupid? Well, what are you angry at your intelligence for? Will we do that? Because we're conditioned to be angry. But it affects us physiologically. Once we start to think about these symptoms, then we start to think ahead of time. We start to try and put some mechanisms in place to control the anger. This is being a doctor of the self. And it's all part of self-realization. Again, Prabhupada says, one who inquires into self-realization and thus subdues the powerful anger, which awakens suddenly, as if falling from the sky, can transcend the modes of nature. Now back to this sentence which I had outlined, which I noted in the beginning, is that Prabhupada says that, again here, Agastya Muni thought it was wise to curse the king to become an elephant. Now, wisdom is in which mode? Goodness. We have three modes of material nature. And in the mode of goodness, all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. So Agastya Muni was not cursing, apparently, from any mode but goodness. So automatically that curse was going to become something good, because it came from the platform of goodness. So we should not, especially, we have to be very, very careful about this idea of cursing. If you're not able to curse from the mode of goodness, then back away from it a long, long ways. Because if we curse somebody and we're in the mode of ignorance or we're in the mode of passion, it will not benefit the individual or benefit us. The benefits of the mode of goodness are happiness and joy. So Gajendra, he got happiness. He got blessings from the earth. So it says, Maharaja Agastya thought it wise to curse the king to become an elephant. So even though this king, he was doing this sadhana in a neophyte way, which means he wasn't employing the higher principles of knowledge and wisdom of devotional service, his cognition or his awareness was very, very limited. So Agastya said, since you're acting like a dumb beast, then you become a dumb beast. Since you're acting in ignorance, then you go and you become an animal in ignorance. Okay. So Gajendra, he became an elephant. And even though he enjoyed for such a long time with his family of elephants, the children and she-elephants, and a very, very beautiful Trikuta mountain, which is very, very opulent, and paradise. And in the great lake, which is so cooling and refreshing and wonderful, that when he became captivated by the crocodile, he remembered. So the first thing he says was Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and then began to glorify Hari. So the Agastya Muni, his curse was a curse in the mode of goodness. Krishna says that when we perform activities of goodness, they lead to higher realms. Those activities we perform in the mode of passion keep us on the earthly sphere. And those activities performed in the mode of ignorance push us down into the lower spheres. So Indradumna was acting in the mode of ignorance, so he wound up in the lower sphere. But Agastya Muni was acting from the mode of goodness, and as a result of that, Maharaj Indradumna was elevated to the higher sphere. Not only Maharaj Indradumna, but King Huhu himself, who was the crocodile. Okay. So in this way, in conclusion, back to Narad. When Narad is explaining to Vyasadeva his encounter with Bhagavan, he says that Bhagavan Vishnu told him when he heard the voice that because you have used your intelligence to remember me, one who uses his intelligence to remember me, that intelligence can never be defeated by anything. Even with the great dissolution of the entire cosmos and the creation of a new cosmos. So Narad Muni says, he tells Vyasadeva that at the end of the last life, I went on chanting throughout my life, and at the end, I remembered the Lord, and I got a body just like the Lord. And at the end of the time of the universe, when Brahma was absorbed into the body of Narayan, I, along with all the elements of the universe, went into the body of Narayan. And when Narayan exhaled, I, along with Brahma and all the rishis and saints, came out. And since then, I continually go on traveling around remembering the holy name. So Narad explains to us in the very beginning that if we use our intelligence to meditate upon the Lord, to contemplate the Lord with our intelligence, the Lord guarantees us that that endeavor will never be thwarted. And it is proven to us here by Gajendra. As Indradumna Maharaj, he used his intelligence to contemplate upon the Lord, so that the time came, even though for a period he had forgotten about the Lord, when time came and the danger was there, he remembered Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and began to glorify and call upon the Lord, and the Lord came to him and delivered him. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Hari Bol. Any quick questions or comments?
So out of ignorance in Vrindavan Maharaj, or inattention, not to pay proper respect to Agastya Muni, so many of us, when you came before a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, we sometimes maybe neglected or acted in ways which are not appropriate for that kind of reciprocation. So how do we see that due to our ignorance that we should be cursed or blessed? I guess he was cursed and blessed at the same time, right? Just when we gave both ways. And how did your conversation end with Prabhupada that you were in the Navy?
Well, to the first part of the question is that when we look deeply at these pastimes and we meditate upon them very deeply, we can see the activities of many great rishis and great saints. We really have to stop and appreciate how merciful Prabhupada is. Because many of us offended Prabhupada out of our ignorance and passion. And Prabhupada, he just kept showering mercy. And then more mercy. And then more mercy. More mercy. Once we were in Gorakhpur, and we were in I'll make the story very short, but we lived in his house. Prabhupada's room was on the other side. Were you there in Gorakhpur? Were you there? So you know how that house was, and on one side, the brahmachari stayed on one side, Prabhupada stayed on the other side. So there was this door, I mean it was like a door, that was right to Prabhupada's room. And Prabhupada had a servant who was sort of short-tempered, ornery, and cantankerous. And he used to always, he was kind of mean. So we were wild brahmacharis, not wild, but we were very excited, enthusiastic. And sometimes we would be up late at night. And so one night, we were up late at night, and I was cracking jokes with the brahmacharis. And everybody was laughing, ha ha ha, and they were laughing. And then a knock came on the door. And so I made another joke. And then a knock came again. So I knew this servant was just kind of a guy like that. I don't want to say that word. But the tail end of a bull. He says, I was thinking that this is this person. So I hear from the other side of the door, shh. And I jump up and I go, shh, to you too. And then all of a sudden, I see the servant come in from the front door. So I knew it was Prabhupada who went, shh. And immediately my heart went down to my sole of my foot. And I couldn't even think what to say, what to do. And I was stunned for a minute. But I ran to Prabhupada and offered obeisances. And before I could even apologize to Prabhupada, he said, it's okay. It's okay. So he's very, very merciful. Many devotees will tell you how merciful Prabhupada is.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
One comment on that question, Antiquota Prabhu had mentioned that in the very beginning we were all very offensive to Srila Prabhupada and not having any Siddhanta or knowing how to behave in any particular situation. But Prabhupada was always so forgiving, and he never took his anger out on any of the civilian classes of people. However, when someone tried to impede Prabhupada from his mission, then intervening was Krishna. Just like when we got the land in Bombay, how suddenly this man who didn't want to relinquish the land to Prabhupada died. So Prabhupada himself didn't take action, but Krishna said in Bhagavad-Gita, my devotees will never be vanquished. So he protected Prabhupada.
You know, that note also, another thing to really consider is that Maharaj Indradumna was already advanced in sadhana. Not only that, but he was a Raja. So he knew etiquette. We didn't know anything. And Maharaj Indradumna, he already had the jata. He was doing Mona. None of us could do Mona. Only Mona we knew was Mona Lisa. No Mona. But Maharaj Indradumna, he was doing Mona. So he was using his practice of bhakti. He used that as an excuse to offend. That's why I was speaking in the initially point about, as neophytes, we have to be careful how we configure our practice with our actual obligation and duty. Yes, sir.
How did the conversation end with Prabhupada?
Okay.
Don't forget that one.
You really want to? Okay. So, going to the very end of the conversation, after we left, well, from that point, I listened very, very carefully, and I agreed with Prabhupada that what he was saying was correct. And I was thinking that this is very interesting. So anyway, I got up to leave, and as I was walking out of the house, or the apartment, I overheard the devotees in the kitchen, and they were speaking in anxiety, and they actually were saying that I heard somebody say that if we don't have it, we're going to get kicked out, and what is Prabhupada, what are we going to do? So I listened very, very carefully, and the devotee said that we need this money for the rent. So at that time I had my salary in my pocket, which was about $300 at that time. So I took out enough money to catch a cab back to LA so I could go to San Diego. And I went to the devotees and I said, here, it was about $250, something like that. I gave them the money. And the devotees said, oh, this is exactly what we need for the rent. And so I said, okay. And so I was preparing to put my shoes on to leave. And the devotee said, no, wait a minute, don't go. Don't go. So I said, okay. So as I'm standing there waiting, all of a sudden Prabhupada comes rushing out of the room. And he rushes over towards me. And he grabs me. And he pulls me into his chest. And then he held me very, very tightly. And then he started rubbing my head. And he started patting me on my head. And he whispered into my ear, he said, you are a very good boy. You are a very good boy. You are a very good boy. And at that time I went through a metamorphosis because at that time, being an American, you can understand that if you have African American heritage, at that time you didn't want to be called a boy. So one part of me is saying, why is he calling me a boy? But another part of me said, oh yes, I am a good boy. And when that part of me said that, I surrendered. And then all of a sudden it seemed like even though Prabhupada was shorter than I, it seemed like I wasn't on the ground. It seems like my feet were someplace else, and that's other things that happened which would describe some, but all of a sudden I felt that, really to be truly, I felt that I have found my eternal Father. And so then I'm walking, I left and I walked, and it seemed like it took me 2 or 3 hours just to get to the bus station. Because all the time, all I could think about was Prabhupada. And all I could think about was, yes, I must become a doctor of the self. I must become a doctor of the self. So that's really how it kind of ended. That was 1968 in Los Angeles, California. Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So as I was talking to you the other day, and I heard in a video that Yadubhar Prabhu come by for Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada is asking you that Dinanath, will you become a pure devotee? And you said that Prabhupada asked you 3 times.
Yes.
Can you narrate that past time?
Yes. It's kind of hard to narrate because I'm not up to the mark. So it's kind of hard to narrate that right there. But yes, he did ask me, and in a very nice way, you know, but a very straightforward way, that he said to me, Dinanath, you will become a pure devotee? So it was a command, but a question too. And one day we were just walking, he just turned to me and says, Dinanath, you will become a pure devotee? So that's what he asked me.
Thanks.
So for us, at that time we were also very young, but just like you were captivated by Srila Prabhupada, with your very first encounter.
Yes.
In the same way, he captured all of us in that way. And we never held anything back. Anarthas, anything that might have been a disturbance or distraction from our devotional service, weren't even considered, and our only concern was to serve Srila Prabhupada, to whatever he wanted. And so that's why he asked, will you become a pure devotee? Because you were such a sincere young boy, and young man. You know, we were boys. Prabhupada always called us boys. So even today I call them boys. Because we were all boys to Srila Prabhupada. But you know, you were so enthusiastic to help Srila Prabhupada in this mission. You know, and for me it's always such a nice pleasure to re-encounter people that experience these things. So I'm so happy you came.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
As you were saying about the Gajendra, he took the form of Chaturbush.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to know all the qualities also were same as Lord, or the qualities were different?
But it says he had a Swarupya. So in qualitatively his form was equal to the Lord, but not in quantity. So yes, he was very, very beautiful like the Lord, same color, same dress, and he had the 4 arms, just like the Lord. Yes. But the Lord is the general, and he's the private.
Thank you.
Yeah. But they're both in the army. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Bol Narad Muni ki, Indradu Maharaj ki, Gajendra Maharaj ki, Bhagavan Vishnu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Krishna Balaram ki, Radha Shyam Sundar ki. All glories to the Samo devotees. Krishna.